that is supposed to get to the customer, right? So we can, off the top of my head, the best we can say that fiber to the X. So fiber to the curb, fiber to the home. It's a good point to start with from rural, from urban areas, but it's a cost factor. So you heard earlier the people on the other panel, and they were talking about cost. Every service provider, when they are going to provide service, looks at the cost involved in getting to the customer. They are also looking at the average revenue per user, whoever the customer is going to be, what they are going to bring them. So yes, we can say that yes, there are a lot of good technologies there, but does it make sense to deploy it in a specific area? So to start with, we can say that in Accra, as an example, fiber to the home or fiber to the curb is a good place to start with. There's a lot of LTE deployment also, and you also mentioned that, of course, even with the LTE deployment, it's not everywhere. The reason being that, of course, LTE people don't just deploy LTE for fun. They deploy it and expect that this particular catchment area will bring them revenues. So it is a particular area that they know that they're not going to get specific revenue from there. They probably might not optimize their coverage to make it efficient for everybody to be able to use service there.
How about Mr. Tio?
Okay. There have been a number of technologies available today for increasing connectivity and increasing speed, throughput, and performance. DWDM, for instance, can be used on top of the fiber. Currently, there is a wavelength for 120, okay, that can split the fiber for multiple users. Multiple operators can connect to the same fiber using bit streaming, for instance. We have demonstrated this in countries like Australia, New Zealand, India, Mexico, and the like. In Ghana, we can begin to adopt the same technology. We have what we call fast mile, which is an innovation that doubles the coverage of LTE, for instance. During the earlier discussion, one guy was talking about their limitation in terms of capacity in deploying the 2600 frequency. With fast mile, you can actually double the coverage of that deployment. We also have ultra long haul microwave links that can be used in the rural areas where population is not dense, it's not concentrated. So with long haul, which spans over 100 kilometers, you can cover a lot more communities. Government is talking about schools connectivity now, connecting hospitals, connecting universities. With this infrastructure, coupled with Wi-Fi, especially cloud-based Wi-Fi, you can really deploy very fast, reliable, and well-performing technologies to our communities, our schools, our universities, our hospitals, where we can even start to do telemedicine, tele-education. We can digitalize our libraries, the e-libraries that we see in other parts of the world. We can bring it to Africa here, and especially Ghana. So there are technologies available, and these are some of the few technologies I would like to highlight for the purpose of this discussion.
So my question to you both, must we always dig the ground to be able to get internet to a school or a hospital? Must we always dig the ground? Or maybe everywhere you go, you'll find people digging, redigging, and digging again. I mean, it happens everywhere. Must we always do that?
Not necessarily. I mean, I don't think it's everywhere that we dig. I mean, so you can see, I think you are basically referring to Accra. So you are in Accra, so you see a lot of digging going on because of fiber penetration. I mean, it's very simple. I think years ago, 10 or so years ago, most of us who were active at the time realized that most people were not, the internet, when you say internet, it's about checking your mails, it's about just ability to do 1 or 2. 64K was working fine for us, okay? But it has come to a point whereby even 1 meg is not good enough. Okay, so why would somebody struggle to dig on the ground to get fiber to a point, a particular company? Because they want they want high capacity. Okay, we have people, we sit in Ghana here, we have customers who are taking 10 gig of internet. Why would somebody go for 10 gig? You probably might not see the need for it, but he has the need for it. The reason being that all the content that is coming up now are bandwidth intensive. So you want to really be on top. And you heard Dr. Thomas earlier on talking about bullet trains and all that, right? If that is what we are dreaming about, then it makes sense for us to dig underground. But I have a different policy. I mean, I think that, and this, with our assemblies and all that, we can make a lot of money from there. Why do we have to get everybody to dig? Couldn't we have, I mean, like we talked about infrastructure, sharing or whatever, couldn't we have just done a way of digging once and putting it tunnels there and get everybody to lease? That's also an option. But of course, to go back onto your point, when you go to the rural areas, I don't think we see a lot of digging going on. The reason being that even at outskirts of Accra, you heard Kweku saying that they are now looking at going to specific areas, right? They were not digging at those areas because there was no business sense at the time. So those areas, you still will get coverage there, but there will be radio. So there's a lot of radio 3G capacity. There's a lot of LTE 4G capacity. There's a lot of Wi-Fi at specific areas. And these are all ways at which we can use to deploy, not necessarily just digging.
Okay, I will say we do not always have to dig. Why am I saying this? The regulators of the telecom industry should have come out with a policy which will allow players in the industry to share capacity, as my colleague said. This was not the case, but it's not too late. The bit streaming concept I mentioned, which allows multiple operators to share the same fiber. We can come up with a policy, maybe have one company dig once, lay the ducts once, okay, and give capacity to the operators, whether be it active or passive. That can be done. But we need good regulatory frameworks, good policies in place to enforce this. We are in this country where tower sharing policy was promulgated. Meanwhile, you find some operators refusing to share their towers with other operators until the tower codes came in. I witnessed operators building their own, and up to today, some operators own their towers everywhere across the country. Why should that be? And when they refuse to allow others to share with them, no one goes after them. No one enforces that law to say that, look, you have the right to share with others. You do not need to keep this for yourself. It's not working. The same with the fiber. Everybody keeps digging. They've allowed the operators to work among themselves. If an operator contacts the other one and he or she is not ready to share, he or she has no option than to also go and dig. But if there is that enforcement, okay, someone to come after it, look, you have no right to refuse sharing with this person. That will work. So I would say no, we do not have to continue digging. Digging must end somewhere. And then enforcement must start to enable operators share whatever is available, be it fiber, be it towers. Even we should start talking about spectrum sharing as well, so that we can move forward. The world is moving fast, and we need to move along. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So for me, traveling around the country, I realized that for most part of Ghana, you would have a phone full of, loaded with data. But you would realize that, outside Accra, you don't get that much, that same speed you would enjoy in some parts of Accra, and it's a problem. In this day and age where you have a lot of business transactions going on over even WhatsApp and email and all that, outside Accra, you don't get that. What seems to be the challenge in that regard?
Yeah, so it comes back to the numbers, right? So every operator, and you're talking about going outside Accra, and you are referencing your phone and all that. So you are looking at 3G coverage, 3.5G, as some of them have. So it's about numbers. There's an investment that the operator has to put in to get to those areas, okay? And that investment will make your phone, when it gets there, to be able to pick the 3.5G or the 3G. Okay, so for instance, in the case of the BWAs, there's also the same numbers game. You as part of the policy, the BWAs are supposed to expand to certain districts, capital, certain regional areas by certain times, right? Now, you just don't invest there. After learning for the learnings they have in Accra, you invest in Accra and you have not really you not really got your investment back. Just go and invest there because the regulator says you should go there. Okay, you do that and your company will collapse. So even the big boys who have been in the system for long, the reason being that they've been here for a long time, they've made a lot of money over the years. They even struggle to go to the rural areas to do 3.5G and all those ones. So you see that they do swaps some of their sites, and I'm sure my friend here will talk more on that. They do swap some of their sites. But if they have to swap at my village, they think twice about it, all right? Because probably it's only one person or two people who have access to phones that will be able to buy data buy credit for that. Okay, so that is purely a numbers game, and that's why I'm happy that our friend Zach is here from GIFEC. I know GIFEC started it was put together for the MNOs. I mean, MNOs are contributing for the MNOs. Okay, but I think, as he said clearly, the law doesn't say. The law says that you contribute, but then it is the government's money. Government decides what to use the money for. What can we do as Broadband Forum? Can we push the agenda so that it makes sense for the government to spend some money to build some specific infrastructure in specific areas that everybody then can use? Okay, it's not easy like that because the GIFEC board is made up of the MNOs and, of course, minister and a few others, but they control it. Okay, but you cannot say that if that's the case, then let's get the BWS to also contribute. They can't. Why? Because you've heard all the things that they've talked about here. The setup was a bit different. The ISP, the setup was a bit different. So they probably might not have the muscle to give you the contribution that you need to push GIFEC forward. Okay, but we need to sacrifice somewhere to make sure that we build the economy, the digital economy that will take us to the next level.
Okay.
If you can answer that, Mr.
Yeah, I would say that just as was said earlier, the GIFEC law has to be revised to broaden the scope of inclusion. But before doing that, government has to find a way of making the BWAs profitable by reviewing their policies or their licenses. The licenses as they are today, where capacity is the focus and not coverage, where BWAs are given certain number of districts and cities to cover before they can deploy certain services. If that can be reviewed, it will help. And other ways should be explored to empower these BWAs to become profitable, as we see today. Most of them are not profitable. Most of them are not EBITDA positive. So before you include them in the scope of GIFEC, so they also contribute to that fund, you need to empower them to make them more profitable. So that is one. Once that is achieved and the scope of the fund is expanded, then we can have more funds available to build infrastructure in the underserved areas. I wanted to ask GIFEC what their plan of expansion is, what their plan of building towers is. But I think you mentioned that you have 100 so far, which you've handed over to some MNOs to manage. What is your plan, your next plan of action to build more towers to cover some of these areas? Private operators will not move into those areas because it's not profitable. Most of them are contacting vendors to go into revenue sharing models. How can a vendor go into revenue sharing in an area where ARPU is like $1 or even less? You see, as compared to $4 to $5 in the urban areas, quarter or less. It's not attractive. And then you get your revenues over a long period of time, say up to about 20 years. No one will go into such a business. So government need to put the necessary regulations and the necessary processes in place to revise the existing laws. And I believe that's one of the reasons for the establishment of this forum, to push government to revise these laws and expand the scope of operation of institutions like GIFEC to include the BWAs so that we'll have more funds coming in to promote the erecting of more infrastructure to inure to the benefit of those communities which are currently underserved. And I believe once that is achieved, we will go a long way to ensure connectivity to some of these communities.
I keep hearing about policy regulation. I would want to find out exactly, do we even have, do we have a policy in place, I mean, as of now, governing the, the broadband industry and how, and where we want to see it, perhaps in the next 5 years?
Yes, there's a policy in place. I belong to another forum, the Alliance for Affordable Internet. My champion is here, group champion, the group for open access and infrastructure sharing. Estelle is here. And at that forum, recently we came out with a study regarding the existing broadband policy. I understand it's about 5 years old and need to be reviewed. That study is still undergoing further scrutiny, and I'm sure it will find convergence with what this forum is also espousing. And at the right time, we'll come together to push the agenda before the Ministry of Communications for the necessary amendments to be made to that policy. And I'm sure most of the discussions going on here today will be factored in that review, and that will give us a better policy going forward.
Interesting. It looks like, okay, so we're talking about internet access moving at the speeds of perhaps tetrabytes per minute and all that. How is that in comparison with our policies and our plans that we have? I mean, because it looks like your policy is over 5 years old and has not seen review. Why do you think that is? I mean, look at where technology is going so fast, yet the goals and the underpinning, policies that need to be in place for, to guide its growth is not, in tandem. Exactly why is that?
I mean, the fundamental reason is that technology changes very fast. And so you need to align yourself with technology and the trends. So you heard Rami talking about, we are here struggling with 4G, and they were talking about 5G. 5G, right. They've already started testing it and all that. So it moves very fast. So I'm sure the guys who did the policy at the time 5 years ago had a very good plan. So they put in place, this is a policy we want to use. Now, I want to look at it practically. So practically, what the operators really work with is what the regulator says, what the license states, right? So you're a BW operator, and your license specifically tells you specific things. Mm-hmm. And so that is the first thing that you use, because that's your guideline to use to deploy. Okay, so yes, it's good for the ministry to come out with good policies for us to see, okay, let's definition of broadband. Let's take it from 1 meg to 5 meg as an example. That's just gimmick. I mean, the guy who is on the street really doesn't care whether you call broadband 1 meg or 10 meg. He just wants to have good connectivity. It's good. It's all well and good to have a definition for it so that we can separate the men from the boys, right? But apart from that, what else? Okay, so yes, we can do a policy even today, and if we are not fast enough, we don't revise it. The policy we just have to do policy and live it. We have to be going, but every year you have to be looking at it, because the trends are going to keep changing. Today we're talking about 5G, we are talking about fiber to the home. Okay, we're talking of Internet of Things. We're talking of driverless cars and all that. And these are things that I'm not sure how we are going to fashion it into the broadband policy, but really these are things that are supposed to happen. Okay, but yes, everybody takes its power from the license that you are given. So your license says do A, B, C, D, send to whatever areas. You try to do that at the back of your mind that you also want to survive. So you want to make money of it. Okay, so those are the things that I think we all look at it in terms of deployment.
Yes, I know we have the policy formulation, monitoring and evaluation department at the Ministry of Communications, right? Yeah. I know they are doing a good work, but let me encourage them to do more. Organizations like the Alliance for Affordable Internet, the Broadband Forum, and even the Telecoms Chamber need to work with this department at the ministry. For a broadband policy, broadband is very fast changing, as he said. And for such a policy to live for 5 years without, maybe there have been some reviews, but without significant review that will lead to amendment of that policy, personally, I think we have a lot of work to do. So I'll call on I don't know if the ministry's reps are here, on the policy formulation, monitoring and evaluation department at the Ministry of Communications to work hand in hand with organizations like Broadband Forum, Alliance for Affordable Internet, Telecoms Chamber, to review this policy quickly. I would like to see the amendment being passed early part of next year to inculcate all that my brother mentioned. With that, we should be making a stride. And I'll really call on the department to work with us to achieve this.
Emmanuel, quickly, are consumers paying enough, or are they being ripped off by internet service providers? I mean, broadband service providers, are we?
Okay, so I don't think consumers are being ripped off. It's basically the dynamics of the economy. That's what it is. I mean, so others are, I mean, I like to make this analogy. Some years back, 10 years ago, we were looking at $700 per meg in terms of wholesale. Currently, you're looking at about 20 or something like that. So we have significantly had reductions. And directly or indirectly, some of these reductions have gone to the consumer because it was more expensive to have data 64K 10 years ago than even to have a 10 meg now. You see, so yes, significantly, we have had a lot of input. We have had a lot of, but we can do more. I think that we can do more. And we can only do more when, and the good thing is that our market, in terms of the MNOs, BW, there's a lot of competition. And competition drives prices down. So even with this intense competition, we've still had a lot of prices have come down to the point that, but it is still not there yet. It is still not there yet because we have a missing link. And the missing link, I think a lot of people have talked about it here, is this shared infrastructure we are talking about. Because if I sit here in Accra and I provide a service to someone in Accra, and I go and provide the same service in Boko, I probably will charge more in Boko. Why? Because there's this link we call trunk or terrestrial connectivity. We don't have sharing at that level, okay? And that is what is missing. Can we get it to do? Yes, we can. At the point in time, the government had fiber through Gridco. At the point in time, we decided to push it partly to a company, right? So who has that? But that license has expired now. Gridco has it. But who is working with Gridco to make sure that this thing becomes affordable for all of us to use? Gridco is a power provider. They are trying to do grid tel. Seriously speaking, I heard their name here. I think they are doing something good for us here. So I try to speak good about them. But the point is that they have to sit up and let us use the infrastructure. It's there. You see, and that's something that the government can do easily because they have a say in Gridco.
Okay, so I've heard a lot pushed onto government regulation, policy, and all that. But don't you think that broadband service providers also have, thrifty, creative ways of encouraging the user who's not tasted internet yet to come, aboard? Because the more numbers that come, on board your networks will actually give you that revenue. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And it's not just I don't see that as only the work of the broadband provider or the provider. I see more of an education gap. And that's why I'm happy that we have this free SHS. You see, so I see that we have a missing link in educating us. So the guy at the village, the farmer, the last time I was speaking about this e-commerce expo. And there are a lot of these things that these e-commerce guys are doing, right? They have a lot of payment stuff online and all that. And they even have things that are geared toward agriculture. how are we enabling these our guys to use it? Okay, it's education. It's about the fact that you tell the guy at the place he can sell his cocoa even before the cocoa season gets on. He can sell his tubers of yam even before. I have a friend, I mean, a mate of mine who happened to, was fortunate enough to go to whatever, federal school outside after schooling. He's come and he's done a huge farm, and he sells the things, the cashew nut, even before he sows them. And all this, we can do that by what? Digital, by e-commerce. It's education. And it is not just, we can't leave it only to the providers, because we are not a lot. How many service providers? How can we get it down to the people? We have 60% of people, we can't touch them, right? So we need people who can go there to the basic level, not just as a basic level, and how we can get people to be able to, and that's why I always love GIFEC. I mean, they are doing their best, and I think they can do more to try and make sure that they touch a lot of people on the ground.
Your final comments, Mr.
Yes, let me emphasize that we need to, of course, the prices we pay for internet currently are quite high. I will not blame it on the service providers, because to buy equipment in foreign currency, for instance, US dollars, and get revenue in Ghana cedi at a very high exchange rate, convert to purchase those equipment in dollars, you can imagine how difficult that is. So that is one. Government must really stabilize the macroeconomy to help the forex, also, of course, to reduce the forex, to help us pay for equipment in foreign currencies easily. Two, we need to promote alternative power sources. For instance, solar. Why should tires and other infrastructure be running on gensets when we can have reliable alternative sources of power? All this go a long way to reduce the cost of deploying, operating, and maintaining networks. We also need to enforce these infrastructure sharing policies we have. If we can have 1 or 2 fiber networks across the country and share among all the MNOs and the BWAs, I believe it will help reduce the cost of our operations so far, instead of everyone building and operating their own infrastructure. So these are some of the few ways we can help to bring down the cost of internet connectivity to the end user. I am happy in recent times the game has changed significantly. We have a number of submarine cables landing on our shores. We have a number of fiber players coming on board to help drive the cost of connectivity down. And I believe we are going to see more of this in the coming years if most of these policies are enforced and really implemented.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite questions from you. Okay, there's a gentleman there. Kindly mention your name and the company you represent, and then you can give us your contribution.
Thank you. My name is Charlie Sekakoni. I'm from Ericsson. My question and maybe some advice to you is the question about the different options you have to connect to the end user to extend the connectivity. I don't know whether you have discussed with the NCA about microwave connectivity, especially in the unlicensed band, the 70 and 80 gig, what we call the E-band, because it's a solution that would fit into your the kind of capex you're probably looking at, and it's unlicensed and should be quite affordable. Maybe the question is, have you engaged the NCA on using these frequencies?
Okay, so I think in the past we've had discussions with the NCA on this, and of course we have a lot of unlicensed band as well, which we deploy on most of our networks. some in the 2.4, some in the 5.4, 5.8. With regards to the other ones, the 100 and co, we've had that discussion. It's not materialized. And I don't know if since you are from Ericsson, you probably will be in a better position to share what kind of microwave solutions, what distances they do. Because, when we are deploying, we look at, the capacity of the microwave solution, that the distance it can cover before we can make such an investment. So, yeah, I mean, you can advise more on that. Once it makes sense for us to use it to deploy in the rural areas, yes, it's an option that we can do. But going to the rural areas is not just a matter of whether you have the correct microwave solution to get there. It's about also the fact that there will be people there to serve. See, so if you deploy it there in 2 weeks, you're not getting any traction on your network, you're not going to make any money. It might not make a lot of sense. That comes back to the education, comes back to access to devices, comes back to a lot of stuff. And economic of scale. Do they have money to even buy phones? Do they have that? Yeah. So I think it's a little bit more deeper than that.
I think my question maybe wasn't very clear. The option I was talking about actually is for the urban, really. And it's the equivalent of fiber to an extent, because we're talking of 10 gig for short distances of up to 4 kilometers. So it's wireless fiber, so to say, but in an urban setting, because we're talking about short distances. But it's an option. If you want more information, we can provide that.
Yeah, of course. If currently the NCA has not regulated that, then it's up to this forum to take it up and push it at that level, and also include it in the policy that is being reviewed. Thanks.
Okay. My name is Fred again. From Kofi Annan ICT Center. My question is, we've looked at the cost and also from the supplying point of view. But I've not heard of anything with respect to support for research to find out solutions for ourselves in Africa. It's assumed that we are waiting for 5G, but maybe 5G will come. Even 4G, we can afford. We are assuming we can afford 5G because it comes with a lot of data. Is any of your organizations supporting research in any of our tertiary institutions to come out with solutions that will benefit us, Africa?
Yes, I remember back in 2011, Alcatel-Lucent entered into let me say, a partnership with KNUST to sponsor students who are willing to undertake such research. We even opened our doors to absorb some of them to work with us to, of course, we also have research institutions to work with such institutions, maybe remotely, and find out areas of emphasis to base their research on. That program ran for some time, and also we partnered one other organization, Soronku, and we also did something with them. So this has been ongoing, but I think we need to do more and probably open it up for more other institutions to benefit from this kind of activity.
Just to add to what he just said, I think this question goes more to the OEMs, the original, which we have 2 of them here. The reason being that most of us providers rely hugely on their equipment to reach the areas that we want to cover. And most of them, I know that most of them do a lot of research. The research might not be based in Ghana, but we are talking about 5G, not that we are saying it in vacuum, but because somebody has done a lot of research and figured out how to put high capacity on it. And they will use it elsewhere, it will work for them, and we'll probably adopt it. Yes, it makes sense for them to do, as he's saying, they probably have done something like that here before with KNU, which is good. But, of Of course. I wish the Huawei guy was here. He was supposed to be on there. They do a lot of research as well. I mean, and these days, if you don't do research, you die. So they do a lot of research to come up with new technologies to, and then we use that, and then we use that to deploy to areas that we want to serve.
We'll take the final question from the back here.
My name is Conrad, and I work with Wellspark and Mobile Content. I'm making a humble comparison with some developed markets and Ghana. Now, in Ghana, for example, okay, fine, let me start with the developed markets. I've happened to experience internet services in South Korea, particularly on a moving train, and it's also over 80 Mbps per second. I was wondering whether I'm in a dreamland or I'm in a train. Now, well, I'm in Ghana and I have all the accesses to 4Gs, and I can list the number of 4G provided services I run on my daily basis. Now, in Ghana, again, we have 63% rural access to electricity, and we have over 90% urban access to electricity. I'm happy that Gridco is part of this event. Gridco has pylons and, should I call them poles, running almost through every part of this country to provide electricity. I definitely believe that there is a way that a certain additional cable can be run along these pylons and these poles to deploy broadband or or internet services into these rural areas, because they pass through every rural part of this country to supply electricity, at least 63%. It will come probably at a cheaper cost. It will come even for Gridco to make revenue to enhance management of its services and other ways around. There will be a partnership to secure, because Gridco's poles are secured and they are all interested in providing certain basic services. They are protected by law, because if you find yourself meddling with Gridco poles or etc., then you are at the wrong side of the law. Why are we not exploring those things and we keep talking about digging and digging and digging and digging and digging?
Yeah, thank you. That I would say is already in place. My brother mentioned Gridtel. Gridtel is the utelco arm of Gridco, which has the objective of providing telecom services. And this, Gridco has aerial fiber over these pylons you mentioned. What I would suggest to Gridco is to find a strategy of reducing the cost of connecting the rural communities. They've been talking to a number of operators who are interested in tapping capacity from this network. And I know they managed to sign on a few of them. What they can do is to come out with another strategy of connecting the rural communities and find a way of working out the pricing model for that purpose. I believe once that is done, we'll have most operators jumping on board and connecting more rural communities than we are seeing today. So if Gridco or Gridtel rep is here, please take this up and look at your pricing model to make it more attractive for the operators to go to the rural communities.
Emmanuel, your final words, since we have to wrap up.
Yeah, so basically what I would say finally is that with this space, we've been drumming home infrastructure sharing. I think it's a major point that we need to take home with us, and we need to try and engage the regulator, engage the policymaker, which is the ministry, to see how best we can get to a point where we share fiber infrastructure as we currently doing with towers. C-Square is here. They've done a good job, at least in Accra and Kumasi, to give us some semblance of sharing, to the point where a lot of providers can be on it at the same time. We hope we can have about 2 or 3 C-Squares around, not just in Accra and Kumasi, but spread across. And that's a major thing that would be good for us. I also talk about the education. I think we need to also drum home a lot of education. And it's good we have a lot of the people from the academia represented here. We need to strategically look at how we can educate from the beginning, right? Because these days you have your kids and They are even doing more things. They know more things on the internet better than even some of us, right? So we need to take advantage of that and see how we can educate them. But before they grow up, they even get to know how to use all these devices already. How do we bridge the rural urban gap? That's the only way is to educate the rural folks so that whatever we are used to here, they can also get it wherever they are. I get that my point.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of our panel discussion, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. We'll move on to the next stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please, continue giving them the big clap. We will move on to, I think, my favorite topic for today. And I would want to actively take part in this other. Ladies and gentlemen, may I invite to the podium Madame Johanna Awotri. Please, let's give her a big round of applause. She was recently appointed as head of operations of the Pan-African Trade Hub System, an intra-African trade e-commerce platform. In her role, she is expected to develop and manage human resource planning policies and strategies, amongst other objectives. Johanna has a career summary reflecting more than 60 years experience in managing educational marketing and IT operations. Her identification with information technology began way back, and she has not left that industry since she entered it in 1993. Ladies and gentlemen, she is going to be our moderator for the next session of the panel discussion. Let's give her one more time as she...
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As the MC said, I'm Johanna Awotri. I've been in ICT in Ghana since 1993, and I'm still moving, but this time into research. Research into how ICTs are used in the rural areas, what government is doing with IT in the rural areas. And to join me in this conversation is Conrad. Of the Wireless Application Service Providers Association of Ghana, and Mr. Kuku Sam of the Institute of ICT Professionals. You're welcome. You're welcome. Please start with introduction of yourself, Mr. Kuku Sam, your experiences, and what you think about the topic we are going to talk about, the consumers and users of IT, which to me boils down to broadband usage, because IT means connecting to the internet. So we talk about broadband, satellite, investment in infrastructure for those in the rural areas, all the things we know go into making the ecosystem work. So each of you give me an introduction and an experience.
So my name is Kuku Sam. My experience has mainly been in telecommunications over a decade experience working in Ghana, Sierra Leone, and then Nigeria. I work for some MNOs here, but in Nigeria and Sierra Leone, I work mainly for Ericsson and then Huawei. Now, I think this topic about the role of telecommunication infrastructure in promoting innovation is very important. But I want to start from the innovation ecosystem itself. So if you want to encourage innovation in this country, then we need to look at the whole ecosystem. So look at the corporations, especially in the broadband space, and then we look at educational institutions, we look at startup and small businesses, and then we look at government because policy is important. So we look at the whole ecosystem. That is the only way we will make meaningful impact. And for me, if you talk about innovation and the role of telecom infrastructure, and specifically, I want to dwell on broadband. We are all aware of the opportunities that the internet brings. And so today, the internet has changed the way we work, the way we play, the way we communicate, the way we engage. And so broadband brings to a country like Ghana huge opportunities that we did not have before. So today we are looking at the area of, say, healthcare. We realize that we are crying in this country that our doctor-to-patient ratio is terrible. So this is one area that I think broadband technology can play a huge role. And then I'll give an example and then I will let my colleague continue. If you go to the hospital, how many minutes do you spend with the doctor? I am not sure it is up to 1/10 of the time you spend at the hospital. So from I am using Tema General Hospital where I was born as an example. So from getting your folder to seeing your doctor, going to the pharmacy, how many minutes do you spend with the doctor? So that if we are serious about digitizing Ghana, we can actually make use of the few doctors in a more efficient way by automating. I mean, the doctor will now wait, someone writes on the folder, you take it to another person, the pharmacy. We can use technology to do all that. And then we allow the health personnel, the pharmacists and the doctors to concentrate on their core work so that a doctor can have some time that he or she can spend actually giving consultancy service to a group of people living in a rural area just by broadband connection. Then we'll be making progress.
Thank you. Conrad.
Thank you very much. I couldn't agree with my co-panelists any less. So I work with Mobile Content Group, operating across 14 African countries, serving a market size of about 320 million mobile subscribers. I've been doing this for the past about 13 years in the product development space, particularly with emphasis on mobile subscriptions. I also work with WASPAC, which is the industry association that puts all the value-added service providers associations together. And I'm on the board here in Ghana and also on the board in Zambia, where we have experienced what innovation is in different ways to different people, how people understand innovation, what they see as the point of connection between themselves and their mobile subscriptions. And my colleague here has mentioned a couple of things, including healthcare, which is a critical area in Ghana. But we can also talk about the recent ones, which is about the digital addressing system and the impact it can have on the Ghanaian economy in terms of tax payments, tracking where companies are, knowing who's doing what, where, and when. But again, of course, we are limiting that to iOS and Android devices. And so my grandfather, who's sitting in some village in the Upper West region, who hasn't got a smartphone, how does he access this benefit of the digital addressing system, which is an innovation, but of course, it's hampered either by poor telecommunication services or lack of knowledge about Android and iOS devices or otherwise. Is there a way we could look at USSD? Is there a way we could look at SMS? Is there a way we could look at cell sites giving such the same kind of accurate information that is required? Have we thought about developing beyond that measure? If they were using voice messaging to achieve some of these things that we can do, that is innovation in different ways to different people. Once I can do voice banking, let's look at social security. At a certain age, it's natural that you tend to want to make more calls than to send text messages. I don't expect my father at the age of 70 to be making sending text messages to a SNIT short code to check his pension benefits, when they can call a short code and understand what it is. There are so many people who will want to contribute to the informal sector of SNIT. They are not educated enough, they cannot speak English language, but they can call an IVR service and they can hear it in their local language and they know what they are talking about. Banking services, mobile money services, etc. That is innovation in the context of whosoever is consuming it. But if we limit it to Accra, Kumasi, broadband, that's what they know. Smartphones, Note 8, S8, Techno, take a picture and put it on Instagram, etc. And when I hear some of these adverts that sound like telcos, I flip. That how my daughter have beautiful pictures on Instagram and because of hearsay yam. Is that the essence of the mobile phone? I mean, and these are the kind of things that we should be considering and talking about. Going beyond photos, going beyond free social media, going beyond free WhatsApp, free Facebook. Have you thought about doing free telemedicine for subscribers? Have you thought about doing free ebooks for universities and primary schools? Have you thought about doing free school placement, free SHS services? Have you thought about doing free this and that contribute to national development beyond free Facebook? What does free Facebook give you? What does WhatsApp give you? Communication, period. Look at pictures. That's what I see Facebook as doing, really. I don't see I can transact business on Facebook that much as compared to what I can do to my fellow Ghanaian using the same broadband innovations and digital services. That is what we should focus on as a country, as partners in this industry so that we sit here together. That, for me, is...
Wouldn't you agree that the remote areas or rural areas have been left out of the Instagrams and the Facebooks and so on that are not really necessary? When you go to the rural areas, the main occupation is normally farming, cash crops. Now, how do you get technology? How do they get access to farm gate prices? As one panelist said, you know, he has also talked about e-health. And we are asking how innovation is hampered by poor access. Isn't innovation hampered by poor access to these people? What do you suggest? Beyond that, the fact that it doesn't make good business, you don't do good business going to the remote areas, what else can we do? Because these are also these are people who are also part of Ghana.
If you do not attempt to invest in a particular area, do not expect to reap. That's the first response. Now, it's very clear. I mean, you need to understand the dynamics of different persons. And I said that innovation must be relevant to the different people, the way they understand it. Now, I have an office in Zambia, and I'm developing a service called Z-Farm for the Zambian farmers, the National Farmers Association. They are interested in putting up data, records of crops, animals, etc., over a mobile app and have it over USSD. Well, I'm sure everybody here understands USSD, so I don't even need to explain. USSD and SMS, so that somebody who wants to access information can do so either through USSD voice or the mobile app and have access to when there are crops available here, what's the price, what's the market point to go and pick those crops and all those things. That is the country that is thinking about its own peculiar needs and using technology to solve its needs. And it didn't come from the government. It came from the Farmers Association, who are registered as a private entity. If we look at the Ghanaian situation, we know that, yes, we have a food market at Tejiman. We know that we have the food and animals coming from Tamale or Wa or Boga or whatever. And we develop peculiar solutions to those particular needs. You will get the people there to get the mobile phones, even if it is the basic technology, SMS or USSD, and use those services, which will still guarantee you your revenues to a certain extent, and you still have participation. And that's why earlier on I mentioned the great schools, pylons, and etc. in my contribution earlier. That if we make these attempts, the telecommunication services or the innovation services that we seek to create will be relevant to these people in their own unique style, and they will use it. You will have consumers there, but if you want to take the one jacket fits all rule to everybody, it will not work. And that's why we are sitting here with an urbanization drift towards the south and the rural towards the north. Well, we are fed by the north.
Well, during one research program that I made, I realized that some of these rural areas had electricity, but could connect to only one MNO, that is MTN, on top of a hill in the village. Now, what they want is, like you said, for the mobile phone to assist with education. But these are people who can't afford the units, so they rely on transfer. What step can we go beyond that to get the other MNOs interested in a place like this? Because if MTN can get there, I'm sure this is not too far away from Accra, but it's rural. I'd like either GIFEC or NITA to define what an unserved or underserved area is. What would you call a served or underserved area? Apart from getting the mobile phones, what else? What step can we take to get them interested in, Isoko? Isoko helps with farm gate prices. What else can we, how else can we get them to get mobile phones? They can't afford it. So how is technology going to help?
I'll give you another example of a Tanzanian situation, right? Now, Tanzania sought to improve on medical health care, particularly with reducing maternal mortality and infant mortality. Some of the networks came together. They had a tax incentive from the government, and they used that rebate to provide handsets, basic handsets, across some communities, right? What they then did was that they chose to gather data. So children are born and they have access to basic e-health services over SMS and USSD or even voice. They're able to have electronic birth registrations over mobile phones. They taught them how to use basic phones. Fine, maybe the Ghanaian languages are too many and difficult. In Tanzania, for example, it's Swahili. Swahili is a national language and you don't need special alphabets to write Swahili. Fair. But even that, we could choose to attempt to recode our languages in a particular way, or the networks could allow character encoding in such a manner that we can write what we want to write using our native languages in the way that people understand and use. Now, if you talk about certain places where you have to stand on a hill, not too far from Accra, in other places, you have places that are very big, plain land, very good places that networks can reach, that because there are no people, they won't do it. But when mobile money started, all the networks started expanding there because I'm in Accra and I'm sending money to my grandfather in the village. He needs a phone to access that money, right? That one, they won't complain about access to rural areas. We won't complain about reach, because there's mobile money. They'll charge me for sending, they'll charge my grandfather for receiving. That is business sense to them. But it's not business sense to provide basic data services and infrastructure service for them to access innovation the way they understand it. Somebody will say, I can't think far.
Okay. Okay, what do you think?
Yeah, you know, technology is an enabler. It's a tool. But real change begins with human beings. And I think that the way we have handled decentralization in this country is also a challenge. And decentralization is actually being preached, but we are not doing that. So I work with one MNO here, and as part of the license regulations, you have to take the service to every district capital. But as I said, if you want to create a space for innovation, then you need that innovation ecosystem. So if you realize what Isoko is doing, actually Isoko is part of the innovation ecosystem, but at the same time they are playing the role of a connector. So they go to the farmers and they register the farmers, and then apart from helping them with prices of their produce to enable them better negotiate prices with middlemen, the Isoko has also created something like a virtual market where they can actually buy farm implements and then pay. So we need at the district level, we need a connector to connect all the people in this ecosystem based on the dominant business in that area. And this is very important because you see, we are here crying, we should take service to the rural areas, take service to the rural areas. So we are looking at, but it's two things. We have to look at both the supply side and the demand side. We need to also create a demand for the service. And the only way we can create a demand for the service is to create that innovative ecosystem at the district level so that broadband will have a use, so that when the service is provided, that service will be used. And government can even facilitate this by even getting the district assemblies to also use the technology. So government has fiber everywhere. So we need to also encourage the district assemblies to use this technology, because actually the district assemblies can serve as that connector at the district level where they can bring all the people in that ecosystem based on the dominant activity in that area. And we can use that to drive the technology in that area. Maybe we cannot take broadband to every village now, but at least we can give them access to some form of telecom service, even if it's using USSD. Because if you go to the village level, for instance, traditionally, you know, at the village level, there is this town hall meetings and all that. Today, how is the district actually getting even information to run the district from the people? If we claim that government is for the people, how are we getting information from the people? So we go to the ballot box every 4 years. We choose a president and MP, and that is the end. District assembly elections come, we choose the people, and that is the end. But if you have simple things like even USSD, you can use it to even run a poll and find out what people think about issue. And I think this is not too much to do. So long as we empower the district assemblies to bring all the people in the ecosystem at the district level together.
Thank you. That brings me to the next point of how people in the remote areas are able to help with decision making in the district, like the districts we are talking about. Apart from voting every 4 years, how can they get their voices heard through technology? Apart from voting, because when you interview some of these people in the rural areas, they'll tell you that every 4 years, some people in big cars come and talk to them and ask them to vote. But other than that, they don't know what is happening around them. So that I was coming to that part of it, that with e-services by government, how do we get people in the rural areas to be part of decision-making in the country? We are talking about e-health, e-learning, in the agri sector, manufacturing, e-commerce. How do they become a part of it?
Okay, so then again, as I said, once we are able to create a demand for the technology at the district level, I mean, it is the first, it is the start. But if you look at what we have today, I even want to find out, those of us in Accra, how are we able to contribute to decision making nationally? And so I think this is a challenge across the whole country and not just the rural areas, even though the rural areas have their own peculiar challenges because of also the absence of technology. But I believe that, as I said, we actually need to empower the district assemblies to, because I see here the real challenge here is us creating an avenue for them to participate in decision making. And that avenue is what is lacking. Because if essentially we see our citizens to be stakeholders and, of course, important ones, then we'll create those avenues for them. So you go elsewhere, you realize that there are some cities in the US and Europe, places like Barcelona, there are crowdsourcing systems that managers of the cities have actually put in place to help in decision making, run polls, gather data. Actually, citizens are able to inform the managers of those cities about some of the things that are going on. And it actually makes things, running the cities, even more efficient and even cheaper. Because something happens and a citizen will willingly give you that information, and you don't have to go and then actually look for the problem and solve it. They will actually tell you the problem going on. So I think this is what we must consciously do by getting our governments to open up so that we create the systems that will get citizens to contribute to decision making and how to run our cities. For instance, if at least there is an efficient system where you can inform Ghana Water that there is a burst pipe somewhere and water is gushing out, okay? When you tell them and they fix the problem, you help them and you help everybody else. But even for those ones, those hotlines, when you call, what is the experience that you get?
Right. So he's already mentioned about the fact that there need to be a created demand, which I agree to. I want to just stay within the confines of Ghana and then the districts. I believe that the districts, assemblies, and etc. charge the telcos. I don't know if it's per kilometer or whatever it is for fiber that they pass through their territory. The question is, this comes an additional revenue to them. What do they do with that revenue in terms of digitization or creating innovation or creating that kind of demand market? Do the telcos insist that, look, hey, we are charging us so much for per kilometer of fiber or per kilometer of whatever. You are charging us for mounting a mast here at this rate. Can you ensure that part of the revenue is used to do this? Well, it is only when that demand is created that the telcos are able to pay you their monthly or their annual fees or retainers that they have to pay for the mounting their mast and passing fiber through your territories. That is the first step. We also then begin to now have to sensitize people how to use these services efficiently. I sometimes have problems with radio stations when they say that we are transmitting through our affiliate stations in 38 radio stations across Ghana. You do it for the marketing purposes because you want to advertise your brand and get some companies to come and advertise. But the question is, have you created opportunity as you, the big radio station in Accra, with all the ability to innovate, to say that, look, let's create a voice box system that people can call into and talk about issues of national interest in their language, even if they don't get to speak on air, and it gets recorded, so that we can gather that information and give it to Ministry of Information or Ministry of this or this government agency that, look, these are feedbacks that are coming from the various places. We are not doing that. So we are just affiliating to 10,000 radio stations all over the country for the commercial purposes of it. That is not innovation. If you think that somebody in Koforidua, some rural area in Koforidua wants to listen to a radio station in Accra and what's happening in Accra, and most of our radio topics are sensitizing what is happening in the capital city, what's happening at the presidency, what's happening at some ministry, what's happening in parliament, largely, opposition versus one in power. We don't create the agenda that needs to create the demand. That is the problem we have. And so until we begin to shift from that and look at technology-driven agenda to develop ourselves, we'll continue to sit where we are. I operate in the product and services space, and my concentration largely for the past 13 or so years has been how to create services for people across all divides, from the smallest to the largest, so that I know that this person will consume the same service in a much more technical survey way. This person will consume it in a less way. And how does it work? Radio stations will tell you, send us a message on Facebook. How many people in Wa or Boga can send a message on Facebook? Send a message on Instagram, Twitter, tweet at me at whatever it is, radio station host. How many of them can tweet? Do you even understand the technology of Twitter in the first place? So
I don't.
At all. I have a Twitter account. I don't even know the last time I used it. So the problem is that we talk above their level. And so once you continue to talk above their level, they will show no interest. When we bring technology down to their level, you can tweet at me, you can send a text, you can call and speak your language. Let me give you an example, and with all due respect to the Asantis here, I run a service with Kotoko, right? And we've sent them SMS information. Now, a large number of them were not subscribing. We went to Kumasi to do a dipstick, and we asked some of the guys, very staunch guys, Kotoko supporters. One person, for example, walks from, how do you call it, Ridge, all the way to where Kotoko trains every day, 3 times a week when they train, to go and supply water for the players to, because they're a loyal fan, because they are training. Oh, this is my contribution. What, a box of water, here, a box of juice. We asked him, you work here every day, but you're not subscribed to the Kotoko service. Do you know what he said? Bro, for some also do the straightforward. Have we created an IVR service that the person can call into? That gave me something else to think about. This is somebody who works in a law firm. And you can tell me, I mean, so clearly we need to begin to vary technology across board. Innovation is there, yes. Ghana puts GPS, iOS, Android, USSD, question mark, SMS, question mark. Which other way? Ghana puts GPS. Like you said, can it be a fault reporting system so that there's an accident here, I go into the same app and I send a location which will give me the same coordinates, GA111, and I write accident here, so that whosoever the emergency response agency can go straight to that point because that address is pinpoint. Water, best pipe, I use the same thing to report. Have we thought about it, or we're just providing digital addresses and we think we've solved the problem? No.
Any thoughts from the floor?
Thank you, Peter. I think that there is about the X number of times that I have attended a forum that seeks to address rural connectivity. But consistently, I've asked myself, where is the commitment to connect to the rural folks? Today we are here. A physical bridge that connects the southern to the northern part of Ghana is broken. We are told that cars cannot move from Tamale to Kumasi. Even physical connectivity, we are struggling. The major problem of rural connectivity is in different blocks. We keep talking about the ecosystem. The various components of the ecosystem are disjointed. One, that is the problem. If a telco wants to go into the rural environment, he is importing a device. He is paying a duty as much as about 40% the cost of the duty. If he ought to co-locate on a tower, he is paying so much for co-location fee. Assuming he is generating X plus 1 revenue in Accra, which Accra is the market, everybody knows Accra, Kumasi, Takrady, the market. He is paying the same amount of money for co-location in Bolga, in Savelugu, in Sandema. How can he sustain the market? Perhaps he's serving a 2 meg environment. He's giving 2 meg capacity to a rural community for Wi-Fi, for anything. And he's co-locating at the rate of 2,500 Ghana cedis. He's paying spectrum fee, the same as he's paying in Accra. So the various blocks that must be removed for rural connectivity to exist still exists. Here we are. We started this show or this forum nicely. We heard from the Ministry of Communication. We heard from the NCA. When it was time for us, the industry players, to tell them what the real problem has been, where are they? They've all disappeared. They've all disappeared. And that is about the number of times that I've raised this issue, that when we get to the point where policy makers would have to listen to the real problems, they disappear. And therefore, I keep asking myself, what are we doing? You have told us all the beautiful things, all the regulations, all the spectrum that you're making available, all the laws that you are putting across for us to send connectivity to the rural areas. It is time for us to tell you what you are doing wrong, that you have consistently done for the past how many years. If government goes to put fiber across the Eastern Corridor Road, from where the fiber is somewhere along Hohoe thereabout, to the cable landing station, what is the kilometers? From Saboba, where the perhaps is landing, to the mainstream Tamale, Bolga, the regional capital, where is the connectivity? We can't connect even the regional capitals. The districts are there, they don't have internet. District capitals do not have internet. You go to university or some polytechnics today, ICT offices are using dangle. They do not have common one to interconnect their blocks. And so the problem is not just about we sitting here, but I think that holistically we all ought to find a day, 2 or 3, where we sit down with policy makers, we all come up with a draft policy that fits in from all angles. Bring in, as my brother said, the very user in the remote area, let's factor his needs into the policy. And that is the only time we can solve the connectivity. Otherwise, year after year, we will organize forums and we will keep dividing. Instead of closing, we'll keep dividing there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Joseph Opoku, and I'm from MTN. I've written here that broadband is meaningless unless it is linked to the total emancipation of the average Ghanaian mentality. Now, when the Tema motorway was constructed, I think it was in 1965, the cars that applied that motorway was less than maybe 1,000. And now 30,000 cars ply that every day. Now, if we want to justify why the MNOs should go to the rural areas, we cannot get any mass or formula to make it make sense on paper. It will not make sense in their books, and they will not go. But the question is, are we able as industry players to see beyond just the numbers? As Conrad was saying, just beyond the numbers for now and do a projection. I think it is more of a lifestyle. Myself, it took me a while before I started transferring money online because I wasn't too sure how it will go. If you transfer money from one account to the other and it is missing and you call the call center, they will never trace that money for you in businesses here. So it took me a while, and I think technology takes a while. It has to be lifestyle influenced. So if we can start, Conrad is talking about USSD and SMS. SMS doesn't make money for any MNO. They won't even listen to it. But if you are able to create the lifestyle of the people in these rural areas, I was looking at the type of phone I use, a smartphone. If somebody is in the farm and is holding this phone and it falls into water, this touch screen will not work. So even device manufacturing, how well are we thinking about the rural areas when we are manufacturing our devices? If I'm going to the farm and I'm holding this phone, when can it last if I'm holding this phone? So I think it's a whole value chain thought that must go into why and how we can reach out to rural areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I just want to add some few words. My name is David Go. Change management is a major problem. Change management. And what we have to do is change management. So we have introduced something we call technology. Our people have to be taken through the process of understanding how to use them. And we must customize this technology to our specific needs. So the technology, if you use any of these things like Uber or any of these applications, they were designed for that market. Now, we also have the experts here. How do we get our ecosystem working where we can design things that will be very user-friendly for our people, even those in the rural areas that we mentioned, how we can get solutions that they can use and then create a demand for them. Mobile telephony, when it started first, people were saying, oh, as for Africa, it won't happen because the people are too poor. They will never use phone. So they dropped some few sites in the cities. And all of a sudden, people realized that, wow, everybody's going to use it. And it's been the biggest technological drive we've seen in the 21st century. So I believe that the data drive can also happen. We need to think about it. We need to think about our own specific needs and drive the demand. Thank you very much.
We'll take the last turn from that side.
Good afternoon. My name is Ernest Brown, and I have a question and a contribution as well. I noticed that both panelists were talking about demand, demand, demand. Can you give us 3 concrete things, what we can do to create the demand? Secondly, The other gentleman there mentioned that, of course, there is a divide between the South and the North, obviously as a result of cost of services. I think there's been some indications in terms of how we can improve. By the way, I represent the ISP Association of Ghana also. And one of the things is that currently, when you look at our taxation system, you notice that there are a lot of taxes on devices that telecom companies use. So therefore, buying this equipment and taking it to the village, as my brother from MTN said, doesn't make sense. But I must add that even the MTNs of this world have realized that the best way for next generation is to target those in the villages. And I know that as part of their rural strategy, they are even developing or building over 200 sites in this country. And thanks to the work they are doing with GIFEC. So if companies like MTN knows that the next billion is not in Accra, it is in the village, then there is the need for government to also realize that what can they also do to get the service providers to go into these villages. My recommendation before the answer, I think that we have to make use of the District Assembly's Common Fund. In that, the same District Assembly's Common Fund is being used to do all kinds of things that is not benefiting these communities directly. The telecom companies, the ISPs, I think should engage the district assemblies through the District Assembly Common Fund or through the local government ministry so that some of these funds could be available for technology expansion in these communities. That is the only way we can create demand. But aside that, give me your 3 reasons, because from a provider's perspective, I'm interested in the reasons that you give to drive demand so I can go there.
Excuse me.
Right.
Can we use that as your final remarks?
Right. I'm going to try to give you 3 demands. I think I've mentioned them severally in my presentations. One, I mentioned mHealth or eHealth. 1. Right. If you create a digital way of getting in touch with the health systems, between pharmacies, between getting to doctors, between electronic birth certificates, etc. I've tried to go to, look, I have, my son is 2 years. I don't have a birth certificate. Why? Anytime you go, the machine is fault. Right. That is a critical example. You know how many times people try accessing or changing birth certificates or even death certificates? That is one side. The health system. 1. 2. Agric. Ghana is starting itself in so much agriculture, agri-driven economy. We want to do farming at the basic level to feed ourselves and sell and all that. Agric. I just mentioned about Techiman. I just mentioned about places where we can create a market, a digital market. I've given examples of countries where people are driving that agenda, where they think that, look, this is where the focus is, where people can access food or information about food and agriculture, etc. That is another side of it. The third side of it is education. I mentioned about education. We are doing free SHS across the place. More enrollments in the various schools and from primary through to SHS levels. A lot of universities are coming up. That is another side of it. I can go on. E-government. I have been to district assemblies to see regional engineers, and then I go and see them reading daily graphic. No computer, no on their desk. And they say they are the regional engineers. They go to inspect projects and they go and they never come back. You can sit there the whole day and wait. What kind of inspection or project is he doing? I don't see an engineer who can claim to know structures without AutoCAD or drawings in any form. What is he inspecting? E-government. I was on a panel in Nigeria, in Abuja recently, on the same e-government things about digital Nigeria, e-Nigeria, in Abuja. And the submissions were driven towards making the Nigerian government setups begin to go electronic, doing electronic things, And when once you do that, it affects the district assemblies, their offices, their staff. When they begin to consume innovation and data-driven services, it will bring that demand to the telcos to invest in the same area. If you have a situation where you see that this is a valuable place, right? If there's a variable, you will create the access to the valuable place. Currently, if there are no roads, there's no technology to report, there's no way to access and contact. How do you still bring the cocoa to the ports? So what you are saying is there has to be access before you create it. It could be both ways. You don't need to wait.
Okay, let's just
affordable access.
Okay, I think he has attempted to answer the question, so I will just make a quick comment.
Attempted. He's answered.
No, to be fair to him.
Okay.
He mentioned e-learning, e-health, agric, e-government, and well, when I talked about USSD and crowdsourcing to collect information, I didn't specifically say it's e-government, but that is what it is. So it's the same thing, and I will not waste your time to repeat it. But then what I also want to put across is this. What I want to put across is this. When it comes to innovation, I also want the broadband companies to look at the ecosystem carefully. Because even though we are thinking about the people in the rural areas, I also think that the urban dwellers, there is a lot more that we can do with broadband. And now the value is shifting from connectivity to services, digital services. So the broadband organization should look at this carefully. Elsewhere, the broadband the companies offering broadband are into other allied services. I mean, if we are able to develop this broadband market, a lot of things can happen. Look at all the universities coming up. We need to start seeing universities, I mean, digital radio, so that 2-3 young people with just their laptop can start something. The content, at least, may be interesting to people. We can even use that to probably disrupt our TV and radio that is always discussing NDC and MPP. And I think for me, at working for the Institute of ICT Professional, this is something that we aim to do, connecting all the people in the innovation ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kuku and
So you will take over and then lead us through the final discussion we have, and then we can call it a day. Thank you all once again. So over to you.
And our last panel discussion involves government agencies. Mr. Jeff Addo, Nita, he's not here. Mr. Osman Gifek, yes. Yes, very short time, very short time. Well, it says here, advancing digital capacity and capability in unserved and underserved areas. As I said, this is Mr. Yahaya Osman. He has spoken already, so I didn't think he needed any introduction. So I can go on. Yes. What is an unserved and or underserved area?
Hello. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I will try to answer that question by once again looking at what we have available in Accra, and also going back to what Dr. Mensah showed us this morning, where we saw a lot of good things, Internet of Things, a whole lot of new advancement in technology in the Western world. Now, if you look at what we have in terms of ICTs and telecommunication in Accra here, there are some communities across the country that do not have such facilities. And even in the areas where you have very limited of such facilities, the use of them is also a challenge. So in the classification of the availability of the infrastructure or the service that is run on top of the infrastructure, the classification is that where there is some availability but in limited quantity, then that is called underserved. Now, where there is no availability of service at all, we classify that as unserved. This is in the context of universal service provision. Okay.
Thank you very much. Well, I have I've done research during Giftel time when there was space to space, which was the only access to information in the rural areas like Nkrakan, and all kinds of places. Space to space had MTN with the umbrella and people going to make phone calls, access to the rural areas. Then Ghana Telecom came with the telecenter. Then Giftel came with the community information centers. And the community information centers were supposed to be located in all the constituencies in Ghana. Kindly let us know how far you have gone with the community information centers, because they had computers, printers, and photocopiers, and managers. These are supposed to be better managed than the telecenters and the space to space. We are going up. So how far have we gone with that program?
Okay, thank you. The community information centers in some environments are what people call telecenters. And GIFEC embarked upon the deployment of the community information centers, as you rightly said, to make available ICT services to the communities that are unserved. Now, from the inception of that program up to date, we have about 204 of them. And out of the 204 of them, admittedly, not all of them are functioning. We have some that are working the way we expected them to work. Some are not working the way they are supposed to. And just a few ones have just been completed that we are yet to operationalize them. Now, I'm mentioning the reason why, I'm mentioning the workabilities of these ones just to bring in to perspective some comments I heard about infrastructure deployment using the district assembly common fund and bringing in the assemblies. Because the CIC, there is a blueprint that we are using, and the concept of the deployment of the CIC was for government to put them in place and the assemblies would manage and run them efficiently, as it were, to provide ICT services and also to use them in disseminating government information and policies. Unfortunately, ICT, as it is seen everywhere, is seen as a cost center, and so the assemblies do not run them and they don't commit themselves the way they are supposed to be run. And so most of the time, we in Accra here, you deploy a nice community information center in a rural village, and all that they tell you is that, GIFEC, your computers are broken down, your internet is not working, your printer is broken. They don't own them the way they are supposed to be owned to run them. So yes, the CIC project is ongoing. The long-term objective is to ensure that at least every constituency in Ghana and every district has a CIC, and we have 204 of them.
Well, I'd like to know whether in doing all this, I know the UNDP was involved at a certain point in time. Do you get other donor support? And if the donor support ends, does that mean a program has ended?
That's very true. The initial concept had a lot of partners. The very first ones that were constructed using the HIPIC fund. And so UNDP came on board. UNDP helped in capacity building at the time. And in the last 7 years, UNDP has withdrawn the service, their support. So the CICs currently are primarily run through government intervention. It is government that constructs them, it is government that stocks them, it is government that runs them. There is no donor support.
Okay, your last question. Government agencies, how do you help develop effective telecommunication policies to meet the needs of the unserved and underserved you defined earlier on?
Right. I think in terms of policy, the fact that government saw the need as part of the UN recommendations to set up even the Universal Service Fund in itself is a policy of government aimed at bridging the divide. Now, in establishing GIFEC, government also ensured that the parliamentary assent that gave birth to the setup of GIFEC in Electronic Communication Act 775, GIFEC was also given the right to tax exemptions. So any entity that GIFEC works with, GIFEC can facilitate to get tax exemption. I just heard my brother, where is he? I heard him mention that when a telecom company imports equipment into the country, they end up paying about 40% on taxes and other things. That portion, for example, is a policy that government has put in place that is embedded in the law of GIFEC that enables GIFEC to take over that responsibility so that the telecom company or the ICT company can effectively deploy services to rural communities. So a case in point is what we are currently doing with MTN, all right? MTN saw the need to go into the rural communities beyond the numbers, beyond looking at how many people are in the community. They saw something that other operators are not seeing. They have seen something that we are not seeing. And so they came to GIFEC to say, GIFEC, we want to partner you, want to leverage on your strength, want to leverage on what you do, and then want to partner with you to deploy a number of services. So GIFEC has taken upon itself to work with MTN. The solution that is currently being deployed is Ghana is the first place that Huawei is doing this deployment in the world because of the earlier work that we did with our rural telephony concept. So we are working with MTN, deploying 100 by December this year. We are by this 31st of March, we are deploying another 100. And by the end of 2018, we are deploying 400 more communities. Now, if you look at this and you look at the total cost of equipment that MTN is going to use to do this way, and you look at 40%, just 40% of that, you realize the government has put in a policy that is aimed and geared towards making communication services available to the rural communities at affordable rate. Because taking 40% at least from MTN or from Huawei would also ensure that the service. And secondly, it is also through the facilitation of GIFEC that the National Communications Authority ensured that the UMTS 900 is now usable by all the operators to provide data, not just only on voice, but on data. If it were on their own, that would have also been a cost. So as government is making such policies to ensure that there is and this is all geared towards rural connectivity.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the only government official left?
I think we'll tie in the last part, which is the open forum as well. So it's not just questions. If you have anything to say or add.
Okay, so my question to the only government rep left, the last man standing, is what happened to the 1% that the MNOs pay on their revenue that GIFEC, I hear, takes for this process? So now we are encouraging MNOs to go to the rural areas, and we are also taxing them 1% of their revenue with the mindset of going to the rural areas. Has it been dropped or is it still there? And if it is there, how do the MNOs reconcile this? Thank you.
Would you want me to answer that question before? Okay, so let me attempt to answer that question before another one comes, because as the Lone Ranger. Let me re-emphasize this, that the Universal Service Fund is not for telecommunication. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in a country where the Universal Service Fund is funded primarily by the telecom companies. That is how come government found a need in 2008 to change the name from Giftel to GIFEC. Because when it was first set up, it was Giftel. And the idea at the time was to bridge the digital divide in telecommunication. And so now, with the coming into force of the new law, which is GIFEC, under the Act 775, we are looking at the whole spectrum of ICT. Okay, the whole spectrum of IT, so right from this morning I mentioned some of them, even to the extent of helping to promote the expansion in broadcasting. So we look at education, we look at health, we look at any area in our lives that involves the use of ICT. That is what GIFEC we are mandated to do. There are a number of benchmarks that have been set up for us under the Act 775. When you go in there, you'll see those things. They are there: multimedia services, broadcasting, health, schools, telecommunication, education, and so on and so forth. The 1%, as for the 1%, if you don't give us the 1%, there's no GIFEC. So the 1%, it is still there. What we are saying is that instead of us to go to a community in terms of telephony deployment, instead of GIFEC to go to a community to put up a tower, and then expect a telecom company to go and put up the active elements on it, which is also a cost to them, backhaul it, which is a cost to them, and provide generators and whatever power. We started by introducing our own model, which is the rural telephony, solar powered, backhauling it to a telecom company, paying for 1 year operation and maintenance. We saw that that was a good thing. But beyond that, what is the speed at which we can move? If we are going to wait on the 1% from the telecos to do that, it will take us forever to even cover just 2 regions. Now we have come out with this model where we are encouraging the operators, partner with an OEM, come to GIFEC, we will do the site acquisition, we'll get all the permits for you, would take on board, would take on your taxes and whatever thing. Then you work with the OEM and put up the infrastructure. We are not interested in the revenue that you will get. You take the money. All that we are interested in is to make sure that there is coverage to the community. That's what we are.
Excuse.
All right. Okay, my name is.
Please. Oh, sorry. With the expansion of your mandate, doesn't it eat into what NITA does, since NITA is the IT implementing agency, national IT agency, NITA?
I would have loved the rep from NITA to be here, but I think that there's a board member who was also attempting to ask me a question from NITA here. NITA, yes, NITA is also doing that. They are doing something. But NITA is not just an implementing body. NITA is also a regulator. In fact, if things were working the way it is supposed to work, just as we have NCA regulating telecommunication, NITA is supposed to regulate the IT industry. So now, unfortunately, today we have a situation where NITA is supposed to be regulating, it is also implementing. But beside that, NITA is looking at intergovernment agencies, and that is where NITA is working a lot to ensure that services are available, get all of them connected. But my grandmother in the village, my brother on his way to the farm, the people who are below the pyramid, how do we bring them? That is where GIFEC, our interest is. You know, but the other thing that we, most of the time, we overlook is that we sit in Accra and say there are the communities out there, they are not revenue generating communities. Unless and until you make an attempt to get to the place, you will not know. And one example is that when we started our rural telephony project, there is a village in the western region called Kutukrum, and we went to put a telecom facility there. We looked at the numbers and we underestimated the community. We provided them with 2 TRX, a capacity, a very limited capacity. A day after the site was turned on, it went down because of oversubscription. Okay? Because on a normal day, when you go to such community, you will not find the people there because they are on the farms. In the evening, when they come, the whole place is, on market days, the place is full. We sit in Accra and we say, people don't know the use of, they only need yam and whatever. There's a community after Agogo, on your way to Afram place. It's called Hamidu. When you go there, you'll find a telephone mast there. It was deployed by GIFEC. I was there last year with my former chief executive, Kobi Echampon. Went to say hello to the chief. Just on our way to board our vehicle, somebody ran after me holding Samsung smartphone, Samsung S6. And this is a community where we deployed the infrastructure with 2G. This guy ran to me and said, "Sir, could you do something about this thing for us? We need 3G. I asked him he said, well, I want to do Facebook, I want to do WhatsApp. And this is a very small community, named after the chief of the village is still alive. It's just a small farming community. So sometimes we assume that these people may not need services until we go there. And the last thing is that all of us in this room here, in one way or the other, we are from the villages. On weekends, and at the end, when there are funerals, when there are festive occasions, we go to those places, and we need to still be in touch with our our families and friends, in those that we leave behind when we go to those communities.
All right, thank you. Again, my name is Isa Yabwabuating. Just a little bit on the NITA issue. We are embarking on commercialization strategy, which will take care of what my friend was talking about in respect of NITA also being a regulator and also a player at the same time. So the issue is being addressed. My substantive question is with regards to asking, sometime 2015 or 2016, NCA organized a national stakeholders forum on domestic roaming, among other OTT services. And I was privileged to speak about the domestic roaming. So my question is whether anything has happened so far, since the essence of it, and for some of us as proponents, was to address the unserved and the underserved areas. So has there been any move towards that since then? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I remember that forum very well, and all the good things and good discussions that came out of it. You are very right. That proposition was to ensure that instead of MTN thinking of going to a community and Tigo thinking of going there and Airtel, the idea was to ensure that as a nation, we use the Universal Service Fund to do a kind of domestic roaming, okay, so that through GIFEX deployment in one community, if you go to a village and you have Airtel line, you can make a call. If the infrastructure is being run on Vodafone, you can still make a call, so that you don't have to expect that every telecom company must go to a particular area in order to have service. Unfortunately, telecom chambers was to lead that discussion, because I remember Kweku, when I had a chat with Kweku Sechiado, he said, look, we speak for the telecom companies, and it is their desire to see this thing to come to fruition. So we'll take it up, we'll get back to GIFEC, and we'll kickstart the discussion. And I'm sure now Kweku is on the other side. I'm still praying that what's his name? The new Ken. I'm still praying that Ken would come to us tomorrow or the week or the day after for us to kickstart that discussion. So the answer to the question is that since that discussion, nothing has been done about it, but it is something that is worth pursuing.
All right, sir. I think I'll go. I'm the final. All right. Okay. Yes. I just want to find out. I know GIFEC started a satellite hub some years ago, and what's happening to it? If you could, share that with us. And also, you started.
Before you go to the